Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So let's hop across the pond. There are certain things that are taking place right now in Britain that are fascinating. Dealing with the spy. So a spy goes down in Britain. A spy goes down in Britain. It's a Russian spy. He's a double agent. Now that Russian spy and double agent, Skripal and his daughter Yulia, are poisoned by what's considered to be a nerve agent. Intrigue. Interesting. Now, he had already served years in a Russian prison. He's living in Britain. Is this an international incident? Theresa May doesn't wait for an investigation. Somehow comes out and gives this statement. And I'm going to go through this quick because there's an awesome bit of news. And I love what's about to take place or what's trying to materialize. And I'm going to explain why I love it. But Theresa May comes out and says the following.
That Mr. Skripal and his daughter were poisoned with a military-grade nerve agent of a type developed by Russia. This is part of a group of nerve agents known as Novichok. Based on the positive identification of this chemical agent by world-leading experts at the Defence Science and Technology Laboratory at Porton Down, our knowledge that Russia has previously produced this agent and would still be capable of doing so, Russia's record of conducting state-sponsored assassinations, and our assessment that Russia views some defectors as legitimate targets for assassinations, the government has concluded that it is highly likely that Russia was responsible for the act against Sergei and Yulia Skripal. Mr. Speaker, there are therefore only two plausible explanations for what happened in Salisbury on the 4th of March. Either this was a direct act by the Russian state against our country, or the Russian government lost control of its potentially catastrophically damaging nerve agent and allowed it to get into the hands of others. This afternoon, my right honourable friend, the Foreign
That's lunacy, by the way. That's utter lunacy. That is lunacy. I'm sorry. Britain, I love you as a country, but this woman getting up here and saying there are only two options. There are only two options. There could be only two plausible explanations in this physical matter reality. Either you lost control of it, or either you did it. And we just need you to tell us which one it is. That's lunacy. That's sad and pathetic. That's lunacy. That she would get up there and do something like that. Now, she implied that the experts were backing her up. She said the experts determined what this was and she moved on. She gave an implied experts. Let's look at buy him a beer Boris. Let's see. Let's hear Boris.
Source of this nerve agent, Novichok, is Russia. How did you manage to find it out so quickly? Does Britain possess samples of this?
People from, "You sure?" And he said, "There's no doubt." So
you argue that the source of this nerve agent, Novichok, is Russia. How did you manage to find it out so quickly? Does Britain possess samples of this?
people from Porton Down, the laboratory.
So they have the samples here.
They do, and they were absolutely categorical. And I asked the guy myself. I said, "Are you sure?" And he said, "There's no doubt." So we have very little alternative but to take the action that we have taken.
I asked the guy myself. Man to man, I looked him in the eye. And I said, "Is this Novichok? God damn it, tell me." And he looked me back in the eye and said, "Yes." He shook me in the hand like a man. Two manly men shaking hands talking about Novichok. Here's the problem. Here's the problem. The guy that he's talking about that told him I shook him in the hand, poured him down, said they're backing our claim, our theory of the case. Well, let's see. Okay, that did not work. I thought that was going to be more dramatic than what that ended up being, but not so much. That failed miserably. But that being said, I can show the headline. The headline speaks for itself. Salisbury poisoning. UK experts cannot prove Novichok nerve agent used on Skripals came from Russia, Ministry of Defense says. But wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait just a goddamn minute.
You argue that the source of this nerve agent, Novichok, is Russia. How did you manage to find it out so quickly? Does Britain possess samples of this?
People from Porton Down, the laboratory.
So they have the samples.
They do, and they were absolutely categorical. I mean, I asked the guy myself. I said, "Are you sure?" And he said, "There's no doubt." So. We have very little alternative but to take the action that we have taken.
Salisbury poisoning. UK experts cannot prove Novichok nerve agent used on Skripals came from Russia, Ministry of Defense says. He just lied. Call it what it is. It's not an embellishment. It's not a fibbing. It's not a little thing. He outwardly lied to the British population. That's literally what took place. I could play the video 1,000 times. They don't know that it's from Russia. The place that he said told them that it wasn't, that it was from Russia, just said they don't know. Who did Boris talk to? Who did Boris talk to? Boris didn't talk to anybody. Boris made that up. They made that up. Now, here's the awesome thing. When Jeremy Corbyn was asked about this, meaning when he was doing loyal opposition, I said, somebody needs to take the hit. Somebody needs to be able to stay on the left and hold their shape on the left through a political win from the right. Meaning when they're pushing this war fervor, when they're pushing this hysteria on the nation, the person needs to be rational and gives a point of view that's from the left without necessarily falling into the hysteria themselves. Corbyn did that. Now, part of my reason for liking Corbyn, because he holds his shape on this stuff, or at the very least from my perspective, he holds his shape. And in this, he held his shape. He remained rational. We need to have an investigation before we jump to conclusions. Theresa May didn't worry about the investigation. Johnson didn't worry about the investigation. They didn't care about the investigation. And now you find out that experts are not backing up their theory of the case. So people are now asking, how on earth did you come to your conclusions when the experts weren't backing you up? Look at what George Corbyn said, as opposed to these guys jumping to conclusions. Listen to what the rational perspective was in Britain, and listen to the way they responded to the rational perspective that ended up being correct.
I welcome the fact the police are working with the OPCW. And has the Prime Minister taken the necessary steps under the Chemical Weapons Convention to make a formal request for evidence from the Russian government under Article 9.2? How has she responded to the Russian government's request for a sample of the agent used in the Salisbury attack to run its own tests?
Listen to that. Listen to that. He's being loyal opposition. What he's asking is right. You were just involved in a war that killed 1 million people. Are you telling me that you don't believe that people should be skeptical about the things that your government says in coordination, in this case by yourselves, but prior you were in coordination with the United States? Yes, people should be skeptical about what comes out of British intelligence, of American intelligence, especially when it's positioning you from the standpoint of a conflict. I can't believe you guys jeering him for this. Let's keep going, because he's absolutely right in what he's saying. Anyone, I don't care who it is, if they're asking you for evidence, you're accusing them of something, they should be able to say, we would like to interrogate the information, or we should have impartial interrogation of the information, not just take Theresa May's for it as if Theresa May is somehow the word of God. She's not. Yeah, what Jeremy Corbyn's saying here is right, and what he's saying here is rational, and it should be an investigation if you're trying to say some kind of crime took place. Let's keep going. I'm not going to play a lot of this. I just want to make a point, because something is taking place that Jeremy Corbyn is doing that is absolutely right and is completely necessary. Let's keep going.
Has high-resolution trace analysis been run on a sample of the nerve agent, and has that revealed any evidence as to the location of its production or the identity of its perpetrators? And can the...
That answer, by the way, is the most important thing in the world. Because he's saying, have you guys run analysis? That answer was yes, we did. How did you run an analysis? Because Britain essentially did not sign up to the weapons treaty, meaning Britain had its own chemical weapons, meaning it has its own version of Novichok. And third, can we determine where it came from? And the answer was no. Boris Johnson got on national television. Boris Johnson has been telling all these people that this was Vladimir Putin, that he knew it was Vladimir Putin. And then he jumped the shark and went to, I talked to the scientists myself, and they told me that it was from Russia. Jeremy Corbyn, a few hours ago, is pushing for a probe of Boris Johnson. The reason is his comments misled. His comments didn't mislead. His comments were lies. His comments were lies. This is vastly important in what's taking place now. Britain is a NATO nation. These guys are expelling diplomats. Now, what happens if Britain escalates this? Like, this is dramatically important. You have British troops that are in Syria right now, French troops that are in Syria right now, American troops that are in Syria right now, engaging in operations. Do you understand how dangerous this is? The United States is paying neo-Nazis in the Ukraine right now. We are engaging into this kind of conflict, this soft war, this soft military. And these things are fomenting in these various countries. So in the United States, you have this hysteria about Russia. Russia hacked us, Russia attacked us, 9/11, 9/11. I mean, this is what the hysteria that these guys have been talking about. They found Facebook and Twitter ads. It hasn't in any way tapped down on hysteria. And now, all of a sudden, a spy goes down in Britain. Theresa May didn't wait for the investigation, didn't care about the investigation, overblew the information that she had, pretended as if she knew somehow that it was Russia, used the term of experts, even though the experts didn't back up her theory of the case. And Boris Johnson went so far as to say, it was Russia, they told me it was Russia. So yeah, they want to open up a probe, and he should open up a probe. George Bush invaded a country and killed 1 million people. I will say it 1,000 times a day if I had to. It is a big deal. It is a massive deal. One of the guys that they were torturing is in a video talking about the torture that he suffered at the hands of the United States soldiers. We call it the Department of Defense. We should call it the Department of War. That's more accurate. We smashed a country to bits. We spent $7 trillion to smash that country to bits. We're dealing with the collateral damage right now, going from one country to the next, all across the Middle East. The UK was part and parcel to helping the United States do that. There were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. That was a lie. That was a lie. All of it was a lie. They made it up. They created an echo chamber in the United States in order to create this ferment, this hysteria, similar to the hysteria that's taking place now. It's making this connection between 9/11 and Iraq that did not exist. There were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Blair and Bush. Bush is finger painting in his pajamas, his footy pajamas. I don't know where Blair is. Both of these people should be in prison. Both of these people should be under the prison, and yet they walk around nonetheless. Bush can be on talk shows. Blair can be on some kind of political thing. They walk around nonetheless. They are not egged every time they go somewhere. They're not spit in their foods every time they go to some particular place. They're walking around, regular human beings. They're mass murderers. All of this, pretext of a lie. Boris Johnson, we know it was Russia. That is a big fucking deal. That's my point to you. We're dealing with international politics, and this guy's jumping the shark talking about Russia. And fact is, they have an incentive to do this because they don't want to deal with the realities of Brexit, that they don't have a solution for Brexit, meaning the Irish border issue. They're going to get handed their ass by the EU. They're looking for something else to obfuscate. Whether they did it or not is besides the point. They don't know if it was Russia, and they blamed Russia. And Jeremy Corbyn rightfully is saying, we want to look into this. There should be a probe of this particular issue. He just lied to the American public on a scale of international politics where we are being positioned in a hostile disposition with a nuclear power nation. Let's take a look at the story. Look, my reasoning for thinking this is a big deal is purely because I lived through Iraq. I lived through the ramp up to Iraq. I've seen the consequences. I've seen what we've done around the world and what one country after another. We've spent trillions on our military. Do you understand there are areas in California where they're like homeless deserts, just homeless all over the place? Trillions. Let's take a look at this. Russian spy, Labour urges probe over Johnson's claims. Labour has called for an investigation into whether Boris Johnson misled the public over Russian involvement into the Salisbury nerve agent attack. If you say, just as a flat fact, if you say, I talked to the Porton-Down scientist and he told me that it was from Russia, and the Porton-Down scientist says, yeah, we don't know that this is from Russia, then that's a lie. One of them is lying. Which one? I have a hard time believing it's the scientist. The scientist doesn't have anything to gain out of this. Misled. It's too soft. You put it in quotes, it's too soft. Mr. Johnson responded that Mr. Corbyn's remarks were lamentable. Meanwhile, the International Chemical Weapons Body has rejected Russians' calls for a joint inquiry into the case. Former Russia double agent Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia remain in a hospital after being poisoned by nerve agent on March 4th. The incident has caused a major diplomatic fallout with the expulsion of some 150 Russian diplomats by UK and its allies being met by counter-expulsions by Moscow. This is lunacy! This is lunacy! This is what... God damn it, man. This is lunacy. You have not even had an investigation. You're expelling diplomats before you've even had the international bodies that are responsible for doing... Why do you even have these international bodies if you're not going to let them do their work? What am I missing? It seems like the whole point of this was not to have the investigation. The investigation was just kind of a happenstance. The problem with this is the scientists did not back up your conclusions, leaving you out there hanging, meaning it's just the government, what the government thinks. And now you have this cloud hanging over your head of this guy saying, I talked to the Porton-Down scientist, and the Porton-Down scientist says, I have no idea what he's talking about. No idea what he's talking about. Let's keep going. Labour said in an interview given to German TV last month, Mr. Johnson said that the people from Porton-Down were absolutely categorical, adding, I asked the guy myself and I said, are you sure? And he says there's no doubt. But on Tuesday, the Porton-Down laboratory said it could not verify the precise source of the Novichok nerve agent used, although it did say it's likely to have been deployed by a state actor. Labour called on the Prime Minister to launch an investigation into whether Mr. Johnson broke the ministerial code. Come on. Do you have rules or not? Do you have rules or not? What is the legitimacy of The Hague if Tony Blair is walking around free? This is what I'm getting at. What is the legitimacy of The Hague if George Bush is walking around free? How do you have a world criminal court when you have people who are doing crimes on a massive level and just walking around like nothing is taking place? Is it because they wear suits? What is it? What gives them immunity in this regard? if you have a ministerial code that these people are not supposed to lie, if I'm not mistaken, you guys aren't supposed to lie. And he just lied flagrantly on an issue of international consequence. What are you going to do, Theresa May? What are you going to do? This is flagrant. This is absolutely flagrant. Are you going to cow your Boris? Shadow Cabinet Officer John Trickett said Mr. Johnson had serious questions to answer. He clearly previously indicated that Portdown had told him categorically that Russia was the source of the nerve agent, he said. Mr. Corbyn says the Foreign Secretary has egg on his face for the statement he made on German television. Either the Foreign Secretary has information it has not been sharing from Portdown, or it was a bit exaggeration. It's not an exaggeration. That is a lie. That is a lie. Call it what it is. Stop with this exaggeration stuff. This is not an ink pen. It is a camel. Well, that would be a lie. It is an ink pen. If I said it was a pencil and I knew that it was an ink pen, that would be a lie. And yes, it may be a writing utensil, but that would be a lie. I'm making the point to call it what it is. What he said was the opposite of what was true. He told me that it was a red car. I find out that it is a blue boat. He told me that it was a blue boat. I find out it was a flying giraffe. Like, I'm trying to get across this idea of, at some point, it's not stretching the truth. If you're calling it stretching the truth, then stretching the truth loses all meaning and lies lose all meaning. It was a lie. He lied. He lied for political purpose and political gain. He lied. Exactly what he did. Talking about exaggeration. Exaggeration, my ass. That was a lie. Boris Johnson. Portdown identified a nerve agent as a military-grade Novichok. Russia has investigated delivering nerve agents likely for assassination and, as part of the program, has produced and stockpiled small quantities of Novichok. Russia has a motive for targeting Sergei Skripal. Unfortunately, so do you. I'm not saying he did. Don't misunderstand what I mean. I just mean he was with Russia for years on end. If Russia wanted to knock him off, Russia could have knocked him off. Could Russia do it? Yes. Did Russia do it? I have no idea. And the problem is they didn't have an investigation, so neither does he. And regardless of whether he, unfortunately, even though he doesn't, it doesn't stop him from pointing fingers. He has questions to answer. Come on, be honest. Be honest. Even if you think Russia did it, certainly you understand that he just lied. Come on. Come on. You can be a political actor, but there is a such thing as reality that everyone else is watching, and he just lied. He added 28 other countries have been so convinced by the UK's case that they expel Russia. In contrast, Jeremy Corbyn chooses to side with the Russian spin machine. The UK has said that identifying the substance of Portdown was only one part of the intelligence picture. It comes as Russia has also sought to discredit the UK's accusations. Russia pointed to a now-deleted tweet by Foreign Officer which suggested Portdown had made clear the nerve agent was produced in Russia. It has sought a joint inquiry after the UK had blamed it for being the source of the Novichok nerve agent use. Russia accused the UK of blocking access to the investigation carried out by the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, but it lost 15 votes to 6, while 17 members abstained. Look, at the end of the day, what took place, I find this to be a weird case to argue, because it seems sacrosanct. It just seems as natural can be. You're in a liberal democracy. When we talk about trying to get to the truth of something, we usually, in the better of our natures, are talking about an investigation, an impartial investigation into figuring out what happened. That's not what took place here. The opposite of that took place here. They came out, accused, and then at some point decided to have an investigation later. But at that point, they had already made their accusations. They didn't have the intelligence to back them up. Boris Johnson said they did. Boris Johnson got caught lying. Jeremy Corbyn says we need to have an investigation into Boris Johnson lying, because that is immensely problematic when we're talking about international politics. And we don't want this guy flying off cuff, especially with the history of the UK as being part of a massive amount of people being killed prior based on bad intel. I said that poorly, but you understand what I'm getting at. So, yeah. This is good. Hold them accountable. Hold them accountable. This is good. This is damn good. We're dealing with issues of war. Hold them accountable. So, let's see. Who's here? A politician lying? Imagine my shock. Yeah, it's not so much that I'm shocked by him lying. It's the weight of what's taking place. Like, we were talking about international politics, we're talking about NATO nations, when these NATO nations are already engaged in soft conflicts all across various regions of the globe. It's dangerous. It is profoundly dangerous. Yeah, it's profoundly dangerous. Jelly Donut. The same people screaming. Skip Rock. Russian bots got Saudi women the right to drive a car. Oh, that's hilarious. Barbara Ramirez said, breaking news. More of the same shit. I don't think I said breaking news. Yeah, Boris was advocating for war. Propaganda. It is, look, man, it is immensely problematic that these guys, I guess my feeling is sometimes these things take a life of their own and they go tumbling into other areas, and you have two populations that have been so brainwashed and primed for war at this point that it carries along. And this stuff is not necessarily worked out from the standpoint of what's true. That's the concern. I am glad that Jeremy Corbyn is taking him to task on this. The question becomes, do you really have to wait for Theresa May to do it, or is there some other body that makes the determination? Fact is, Boris Johnson lied. He should be held accountable for that. Especially, I wouldn't care so much if it's inter-politics, if it's in the country, you guys, whatever. But we're talking about positioning them for war. And anything that takes place from the standpoint of the UK takes place also with us. With us. This also affects us. So, yeah. Jeremy Corbyn is being loyal opposition. Jeremy Corbyn is doing what he's supposed to do. And yes, Boris Johnson should be held to account. The government needs to be held to account if the government is lying to the public. So, I will leave it at that. I'm not going to keep this one too long. This one is just kind of a, hey, heads up. Good job, Jeremy Corbyn. Hold him accountable. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. I'm going to get lunch. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support the Patreon. Thanks, everyone.